We're off the film with this German TV channel.
Gary, let's start off with the political bit. There's a lot of talk now, and actually in former governments already, of levelling up.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
It's a great idea. It'd be nice if they did it. Levelling up, obviously, it's often not clear what is meant, whether it's regional levelling up. For me, I'm an inequality economist. So what I look at is poverty. And if we look at what's happened between individuals during the COVID crisis, it's been the biggest ever one-year increase in wealth for the rich and the super rich. The average British billionaire increased their wealth by £630 million in the first year of COVID, which is amazing. And yet now we're seeing ordinary families, especially poorer families, basically struggling to just pay the bills. So in the last 2.5 years of this levelling up government, we've seen the poor driven further into poverty and the rich seeing their wealth exploding. So for me, levelling up would be great, but if you look at what they're actually doing, it's not happening.
How is that working? Why does it happen that you pour money into poor people's pockets by spending, I don't know, 400 billion or what Rishi Sunak spent, and it all trickles up and not down?
Yes, that is an excellent question. As you make clear, the British government printed £450 billion during COVID. That's £10,000 per adult. And most of that money was actually given to people who were in quite desperate need, people who, for example, had lost their jobs. So how is it that it ends up with the richest people? At the beginning of COVID, I spent a lot of time basically thinking about this because I knew extra money was going in and I knew it was going largely to furloughed workers, but I also knew that furloughed workers were ending up poorer than they were pre-COVID. So this money is being poured in, it's going directly to the furloughed workers, but they are not keeping the money because they've lost their incomes. So you have to follow the money through, right? Where is the incomes of the workers gone? Well, they're not getting paid their wages anymore. So we go back to the companies. Are the companies holding the money? Well, actually, the companies are not because they've lost their customers. So if you go back to the customers, we actually see it's customers who accumulated a huge amount of money during COVID. And people watching this might be thinking, well, I'm a customer. I haven't accumulated £10,000. And the reason for that is it's only customers who had very large luxury and non-essential spending. If your spending, like most people, is large on essentials like rent, mortgage, food, bills, you still had those expenditures. But if your expenditures are largely luxuries and non-essentials, you couldn't buy those things anymore during COVID. So what happened was the rich and the super rich stopped spending, and the consequence was ordinary families stopped being able to pay their bills. So the money went in to the poor, but it straight away went back up to the rich who accumulated it. So you could actually predict this right at the beginning of COVID, that there would be an enormous increase in cash accumulated by richer people during COVID. And if you look at my videos and articles at the beginning of COVID, you'll see that I did predict it, and it is exactly what's happened. And we're seeing the predictable consequences now: inflation, house prices rising, stock prices rising.
Well, that's what happened in the last 2 years. But even before that, Britain seems such an unequal society. How did that happen over the years? What is the kind of general thing in there, apart from capitalism, which obviously...
Well, if you look into the history of it, if you're interested in the history, it's actually worth reading Piketty, the French economist's book, Capital, at least the first couple of chapters, because he really looks into the history of it. The history of inequality in this country, it was very, very high in the pre-war period. Then after the Second World War, it became much, much lower. That was a period of very high taxation. Famously, the Beatles paid 95% taxation on their income, 19 for him and 1 for me. But in the 80s, taxation of the richest was decreased massively. Now, if you don't tax rich people, I think it's important to realize that rich people generate huge amounts of income from their wealth. So if you have a wealth of £200 million, like our Chancellor, you will get £6 million a year just for getting out of bed, So if the rich don't pay taxes, then naturally their wealth will swell and they will take the wealth of ordinary families. I think this is the natural way of things if you don't tax rich people. Rich people are rich. As a result, they have huge incomes and they can buy the assets.
Okay. That has happened over the centuries, obviously. Do you feel there is a rather high acceptance of inequality in the UK?
I think it really depends who you ask. I think there's actually been a kind of interesting change in tone of this, because I've been campaigning for greater taxation of the richest for a while now. And I was talking about it 10 years ago when I was a trader. And back then, people would say you can't tax the rich because it's bad for the economy. And I think increasingly, that kind of manner of thinking has become less and less popular. I think increasingly people can see that the last 10, 15 years have not worked for the economy or for ordinary people. So people are accepting what's happening now is not working economically. But now when I say you need to tax the rich people, what comes back is, well, you can't. They'll leave. So I actually think what you've seen is the rich have kind of lost the battle on it's a moral good for us to be rich. And now they're saying, well, it doesn't matter because you can't stop us. So that's not the most positive response, but I think it shows more and more ordinary people are accepting that the levels of inequality now are way too much and that they're not working.
Well, actually, it's a bit of a side question, but I'll ask it nevertheless. We're doing this also because there's a lot of excitement in here, but also in Germany, about the Jubilee of the Queen.
Yeah.
And we thought, well, it's nice to do something about the Queen. We would rather want to do something about the state of the UK, economic state. How is it going for people 70 years after she came to the throne?
Well, yeah, I've never met the Queen. I'm sure she's a lovely, lovely lady, and I hope she's recovering from her COVID very well. She resided over a period of actually phenomenal economic strength in this country. If you look at back 50s, 60s, 70s, my dad worked for the post office for 25 years. I think 35 years, in fact. He never earned a lot of money, but he was able to buy a house, support 3 kids, and now he's retired. Not too long ago, that was possible in this country. But now you have people working that kind of job who are literally homeless because they can't afford to pay the rent. So during the period the Queen has been the Queen, we've seen some really amazing economic times, where ordinary people have been able to live good lives, working ordinary jobs. But unfortunately, we're losing that now. And increasingly, ordinary people earning ordinary jobs can't afford to own property or even get financial security. I get messages all the time from young people who are smart, ambitious, doing everything right, going to the right uni, studying hard, and they can't afford to buy a house. They can't afford to become financially secure. So, I wouldn't like to point the finger at the Queen directly, but yeah, we've lost a lot.
My question would be, is there not kind of baked-in inequality in this country because you have a monarch? I mean, people accept that people are born into something special and rich, and it's okay.
Listen, every country has inequality, but that level of inequality changes. Do you know what? I campaign for more inequality, and sometimes people turn around to me and say, you're never going to get perfect equality. And I say, look, that may or may not be true, but you can stop inequality from killing your economy. 50 years ago, inequality was much less than it is now. And inequality in the last 20 years has increased significantly. So I don't like this fatalistic attitude that you will always have inequality because, it is true you'll always have inequality, but if you allow it to destroy your economy will still be destroyed. You know what I mean? We still need to manage this. And it's growing and growing. I've been analysing the economy for 10, 15 years now, and I've been betting on disaster because of inequality, and I keep being right, and I don't want to be right, Your car will never be perfect, but, if part of it is broken, you still need to fix it. And the economy is the same. We will never have a perfect economy, but we can have a much better one than we have now.
What was your motivation to become a trader?
I was poor, and I wanted to be rich, I come from a very poor family, and I helped my brother get a house, I helped my sister get a house, I take care of my parents. I was poor, I know what it's like to be poor. When you're poor, ain't no one going to come out and make you not poor unless you do it yourself. That's what I wanted to do, and that's what I did.
And once you had the feeling, okay, now I can do this, that was it?
Yeah, I was always smart, good at maths at school, I just thought, why not me? I went to a good university, I was one of the top students, and yeah, I thought I could do it. When I went into the city and I realized the truth is, there are some smart people there, but it's not full of geniuses. Yeah, I'm as good as anyone. Why can't I be the top trader in the city? And I was.
You could have gone on, made loads of money and spread it around.
Yeah, but I literally made money by betting on economic disaster, and that's not an ideological thing. My job was to analyse the economy. I analysed the economy. My conclusion was we have a serious structural problem of inequality. It's not being dealt with. It's not going to be dealt with. We will have a disaster. I bet on that. And then by the end of that year, I was the top trader in the world for one of the world's biggest banks. You don't need to be Mahatma Gandhi to say something should be done here. You know what I mean? If your job is to analyse fire security and the result is the whole city is going to burn down, what are you going to do? You're not just going to bet on it. You're going to try and tell people, Look, I'm a very good economist. I've been paid very, very well because I understand what's happening. I think we have a problem which is very serious and getting worse, but it's fixable. And I want us to fix it because I don't want the world to be terrible. It's not complicated.
Have you been approached by the Labour Party?
I don't want to name individual names, but I have spoken to some Labour MPs. There's a reshuffle recently. They haven't spoken to me since. But I'm here, and I'm open to the Conservatives as well. I call out Rishi Sunak often because he's very wealthy and he's a Chancellor, so he's very powerful. I'd be delighted to speak to him about ways they could improve the economy. Yeah, I'm open to it. You can give them my number if you know him.
Unfortunately not. Sorry. He won't. Yeah.
Sun's gone.
Sarah, can
You can move the light.
I'm almost done. Rishi wouldn't want to talk to you, I think.
I strongly suspect you wouldn't, yes.
He doesn't want to be taxed. What else I want to say? Energy prices. Let's talk about energy prices. Sarah went to Burnley and filmed with some really poor people in the proper sense of the word.
Yeah.
What do these energy prices tell us? I mean, obviously everybody was like, oh, the energy prices are going up. We can't do anything against it. And unfortunately, now you have to pay them.
Yeah. Okay, the energy price situation is very, very serious, okay? It's a really significant extra cost on families who cannot afford to pay it. We're talking about people will be driven into poverty, not able to heat their homes, not able to feed their families, not able to pay their rent, their mortgages. People will become homeless. This is really, really, really serious. The message I would like to put out there is that in the last 2 years, we have seen an unprecedented increase in millionaire and billionaire wealth. And that's a result of the way we dealt with the COVID crisis. So people are given this message that this is almost like an act of God, or at least it's because of the war, prices have gone up, there's nothing we can do. But at the same time, we've seen the average billionaire increase their wealth by £630 million in this country. A single year, 22% increase in billionaire and millionaire wealth, the biggest ever single year increase. And yet we're sitting here with a cost of living crisis, which means ordinary people can't pay the bills, and we're saying there's nothing we can do. There's no money. It's mind-blowing to me. Why are people not pointing out the fact that the rich and the super rich have made an unprecedented amount of money in the last 2 years? If you tax them, then there's no crisis. But we're not talking about it, and it's driving me mad, and that's why I'm talking about it.